In the Belgian Grand Prix, Scuderia Ferrari placed a well-calculated strategic bet on a lower downforce configuration of the SF-25 single-seater driven by Charles Leclerc in order to maximize top speed performance and position itself as the first car behind the seemingly unreachable McLaren duo. This approach proved to be effective, helping the Italian team strengthen its grip on second place in the 2025 Formula One Constructors Championship standings. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton delivered a brilliant and determined recovery drive in wet track conditions, climbing all the way from 18th on the starting grid to a solid 7th-place finish, capitalizing on a perfectly timed strategy call to switch from intermediate tires to slicks at a crucial moment in the race. The Sunday race, held at the legendary Spa-Francorchamps circuit, delivered Ferrari's 5th podium finish of the 2025 Formula One season. The result also brought a strong overall points haul for the Italian team, allowing it to consolidate its position as the most consistent challenger to McLaren in the current constructors' standings. Just as significant, at the end of the 44 laps of the Belgian Grand Prix, both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton were seen smiling, which is something that cannot always be taken for granted in recent races, given the often turbulent and unpredictable nature of Formula One weekends in the current competitive environment. The conclusions drawn from the race weekend in Belgium served to validate the quality of the technical work carried out by the engineers and performance specialists within the Maranello team. These latest developments represented a tangible step forward in the team's ongoing pursuit of competitiveness, although it was clear that this should not be confused with a breakthrough capable of disrupting McLaren's current dominance. At this stage of the championship, Ferrari had clearly established itself ahead of Mercedes and was capable of fighting closely with the RB21 of Max Verstappen, particularly in races where the Red Bull garage made strategic or technical errors, something that had become more frequent in recent months. However, it was important to emphasize that McLaren appeared to be operating on a completely different level, with a level of pace that remained consistently beyond the reach of its rivals. In addition to the solid balance achieved thanks to the most recent aerodynamic upgrades introduced to the SF-25, Ferrari also executed a well-managed weekend from both strategic and operational standpoints. The decision not to increase the level of aerodynamic downforce prior to Saturday's qualifying session, unlike the approach taken by Red Bull, proved to be the correct and most effective choice. Equally flawless was the pit wall's decision to call Lewis Hamilton into the pits at the ideal moment to switch from the intermediate tires, which had been fitted at the start of the race, to the slick compound as the track began to dry. This well-timed stop allowed the 7-time Formula One world champion to convert what had been shaping up to be a respectable recovery drive into a valuable and perhaps unexpected finish within the points-paying positions. Following a disastrous qualifying session on Saturday that had left him at the back of the grid, Ferrari had chosen to start Lewis Hamilton from the pit lane. This strategic decision allowed the team not only to install a fresh power unit, but also to make a significant change to the car's setup, tailoring it more specifically for the anticipated wet conditions expected on Sunday. Lewis Hamilton made the most of the technical advantage offered by the revised configuration during the early phases of the Belgian Grand Prix. He launched a determined and spirited charge through the field, driven by a combination of personal pride and the urgent need to recover positions. The British driver expressed his dissatisfaction regarding the use of the rolling start procedure, stating to the team that the cars had kept going in circles and implying that a rolling start had not been necessary. However, this viewpoint arguably overlooked the ever-present risk of first-corner collisions at Spa-Francorchamps, particularly when starting from the rear of the grid. The La Source hairpin is known for its tight entry and frequent incidents at the beginning of races. The most decisive moment of Lewis Hamilton's race came at the end of the 11th lap, when the team called him in for a tire change at precisely the right moment. After the race, he remarked that the decision had been perfect. Team principal Frederic Vasseur, however, chose not to reveal whether the call had originated from the driver himself or from the team's strategists. He explained that at Ferrari, they did not distinguish between drivers and team personnel when making such decisions, emphasizing that it had always been a collective effort. The decision to configure Lewis Hamilton's SF-25 with a higher level of aerodynamic downforce, aimed at maximizing grip in wet weather, inevitably brought certain disadvantages once the track had dried. In the second half of the race, this setup began to show its limitations. The Briton lacked the straight-line speed necessary to mount an overtaking move on Alexander Albon's Williams on the long straights. Additionally, he was forced to adopt a conservative approach for the remainder of the race, carrying out repeated lift-and-coast procedures on team instruction. Unlike previous races where such measures had been related to temperature concerns, in this instance the issue was fuel consumption. The added drag resulting from the higher downforce setup had led to increased fuel usage, requiring Lewis Hamilton to manage his pace to ensure he reached the finish line. In contrast, the race of Charles Leclerc developed in a more linear and controlled manner, but it ultimately delivered higher returns in terms of results. The Monegasque driver laid the foundation for his third-place finish in the opening laps of the race, especially during the early moments when it had appeared almost certain that Max Verstappen would overtake him. Managing a low-downforce SF-25 in damp track conditions, while simultaneously defending from Max Verstappen, was not a straightforward task for Charles Leclerc. However, as the track surface dried progressively, the dynamics of the situation shifted to his advantage. In the second half of the Belgian Grand Prix, Max Verstappen made several attempts to challenge the Ferrari driver along the Kemmel Straight, but even with the use of the drag reduction system, the extra downforce on the Red Bull prevented him from getting close enough to pose a real threat to Charles Leclerc's position. In the closing laps, Charles came under attack from the Dutchman, but he fought hard to fend him off to finish third and claim his and the Italian side's fifth podium finish of the season, the 48th overall for the Monegasque and the 834th overall for the Maranello team. After the race, Frederic Vasseur stated that it had not been guaranteed the Grand Prix would take place entirely in wet conditions. The French manager explained that in the end, that was exactly what happened. He also pointed out that such scenarios were always a bit of a gamble, revealing that even on the morning of the race, he had not expected to see the sun appear later in the day. That very sunlight will now accompany Ferrari to the Hungaroring circuit in Budapest, where Charles Leclerc is confident that the technical updates introduced at Spa-Francorchamps might prove particularly effective in the slow-speed corners typical of the Hungarian venue. Frederic Vasseur confirmed that introducing new components during a sprint weekend is never an easy task, but the team did not want to postpone everything until Budapest. The Ferrari team boss indicated that they would evaluate the full impact of the upgrades in the upcoming race weekend. Fred Vasseur acknowledged that low-speed corners had not been a strong point for the team so far in the season, but he also stated that there was room for improvement. He expressed confidence that the data collected and the tests conducted over the course of the Spa weekend would ultimately yield positive results.